Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Whitney Stoll. I'm your DC Post president, and welcome to our February First Friday webinar. And so thank you all for joining us here today. Joined by me is Bree Beal and Jim D'Amelia, who will be moderating our webinar today, and as well as the chat. So we have over 100 registered participants from all over the world. So I know you're excited about this program as we are. So please join me in welcoming our guest presenters, Bosco Chan and Gus Morales from Gannett Fleming, who will be sharing building secure systems, integrating security by design, and risk management throughout the project lifecycle. So this educational presentation will share security by design principles through a case study and explore emerging trends in risk management and cybersecurity so you can use when designing your next project. But first, I'd like to welcome you to the First Friday series, which is provided to you through SAME's commitment to offering the AEC community effective training, development, and networking programs. The DC Post is helping sustain the future of the profession with these monthly education-focused sessions through topical and relevant content to our industry. So thank you all for joining us as we start our program today. So please feel free to use the chat, introduce yourself, share your LinkedIn profile, and any contact information, where you're calling in from throughout the presentation. Ask questions so we can address them during our Q&A portion at the end. And if you'd like to save the chat, feel free to go up to File and then go down to Save and then click on Chat, just for future reference. This is a lunchtime session for those joining us on the East Coast. So feel free to eat your lunch during the program. So we are glad you could join us here today, and we're also happy that we could offer this virtual program to our community, regardless of where you're calling in from. So let's start with a moment of silence to remember our active duty military, first responders, and all who need our care and thoughts throughout the world right now. Thank you. And now, would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'd like to take a moment to thank our annual and First Friday sponsors. So I'd like to thank you to Fox Rothschild. And we truly appreciate your support. And we could not have put on our events without you, and we are very grateful for your outstanding sponsorship. And your support helps us meet our society's goals, including providing excellent content for our members, industry and government engagement, building resilient communities, connecting our future leaders through our student and young member groups, enriching the STEM pipeline, and preparing our military and veterans for life after the service. If you're not already a DC Post sponsor and would like to support our post with annual sponsorship, we'd love to be able to add your name to the list for future programs and events throughout the year. Annual Platinum sponsors and First Friday sponsors help support this webinar with free registration for our SAME members and full-time students. So please visit our website for more information about sponsorship and how you can get back to the community through the DC Post sponsorship. Now it's time for the main program. And please note this program provides one PDH from the DC Post. Look for an email with the subject line document delivery from SAME DC and Eventbrite with a copy of the program slides, your PDH certificate, and an opt-in list of attendees who pre-registered for the session. We are recording this webinar, and we will post a video on our website later on. I'm not going to read to you the learning objectives since most of us saw the same objectives when we all registered. Instead, I'm going to introduce to you our featured panelists in just a minute. And while I do the introductions, if you haven't done so yet, please feel free to use the chat, introduce yourselves, share any contact information, where you're calling in from. This is a webinar series for you to learn about the special topic. It will help you expand your business network as well. So please leverage it as much as you'd like to. Use the chat throughout the presentation to ask questions to our presenters as well. If there's a particular slide you'd like to talk about, please share that information in the chat, and we'll make sure we address those questions at the end of the program. So now I'd like to introduce the the presenters. So Bosco Chan is a distinguished cybersecurity and privacy professional. Bosco has a deep understanding of assessing privacy and information risks. He also offers comprehensive risk management solutions, drawing from his background in financial and legal impact analysis. He holds a Bachelor of Science from the University of Waterloo and is joining us today from Toronto. And then we have Gus Morales, and Gus is a cybersecurity expert at Gannett Fleming, specializing in threat detection, prevention strategies, and rapid recovery plans, with a deep knowledge in CIS standards and OT and IT delivery. Gus holds an MS in cybersecurity from Nova Southeastern University and a BS in computer information systems from Cal State in Los Angeles. And he is joining us today from Southern California. So Bosco and Gus, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm going to turn the presentation over to you, and the floor is yours. Good to go on your end.
Sorry, I was on mute. Can you see my screen okay?
It's coming in. You're good to go. Yep, we can see it.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for having us. We're very excited to be here at the SAME DC Pulse to talk about integrating security by design and risk management into your project lifecycle. So let's take a look at the agenda today. Frankly, pretty straightforward, right? We have roughly 45 minutes here with the group here. From the agenda standpoint, we have quick introduction, and then we're going to talk about the context and importance. We're going to dive right into the SbD, or security by design principles. And then we're going to talk about integrating risk management into your project cycle. And then we're going to spend quite a bit of time today here around the case study. We have a really good case study that we actually still on this project, and for this client, we're going to talk a little bit about that. And at the end, we're going to talk a little bit about emerging trend, future direction, and then we'll close out by concluding what we talk about today. So with that, I'm going to jump to the next slide, introduction. So again, my name is Bosco Chan, one of the principal cybersecurity analysts at Gannett Fleming. And with Gus.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gus Morales. I'm a principal cybersecurity analyst at Gannett Fleming, and I'm specializing right now in the transportation sector, helping out rail operators throughout North America. Thank you, Bosco.
Thank you, Gus. A little bit about Gannett Fleming in case you don't know us yet. We are a privately held architecture, engineering, and construction firm, partnering closely with our client on some of the toughest challenges. Founded back in 1915 with clients across North America and some selected global locations. Right now, we have roughly 2,500 engineers that work specialized in the transportation sector, water resource sector, power and energy sector, and the federal sector. Let's talk a little bit about the context and importance. Before we do that, when we first get in touch with the SAME DC Pulse folks, Breed and the bigger group, we were talking about, well, let's talk about cybersecurity. One of the first things that I suggested was, why don't we do a live hacking demo of cracking into the SAME DC Pulse website? And then Bree was like, no, that's not a good idea. I'm not sure that's a good idea to do for a conference. But the point that I'm obviously that's a fictitious story. But the point that I really want to make here is when it comes to cybersecurity, everyone just they think about, oh, that hack, that teenager sitting in the basement were able to pull that off. It's very sexy. That's very fascinating. That's very intriguing. That's all people want to talk about is the sexy factor of the security, right? The reality of cybersecurity is not that sexy. I hate to say it. It takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of structure. It takes a lot of process. It takes a lot of some of these core principles to secure your critical infrastructure, to put the cybersecurity program together, right? So what we want to talk about in the next 35, 40 minutes is talk about that process, talk about that structure and the basic principle when it comes to cybersecurity. All right, so let's set the stage here, right? And frankly, the reason that you're here, you read the abstract, right? So let's recap on the abstract. So we live in this new world of IT and OT just converging and interconnected. IT, I would assume, I'm pretty sure most of you understand what that means. Some of you may already heard of OT or already in the OT industry. But for those of you, OT, operational technology, is new to you, the definition is pretty simple, right? It's the hardware and software that monitor and control devices, process, and infrastructure that's used in the industrial setting. Again, the case study we're going to get into in a little bit, it's in the rail and transportation sector. As you could imagine, there's railroad control, there's communication control on the train. All that is part of your industrial system. That's OT, operational technology. And it's absolutely critical to secure not just the IT, on one side or OT side, you need to make sure both are really secure in this really interconnecting world. Just want to tell you a quick story. Some of you may already heard of it. This must be 10 years ago now. There was a malicious code created by the Iranian government called Shamoon. Shamoon essentially was a malicious code that was created to target Saudi Arabia, right? As you know, they don't get along too well. So what they did was they deployed Shamoon, the malicious code, to one of the Saudi state oil company. Got onto the IT network, spread really quickly to the OT network, wiped the hard drive, and essentially, by the end of it, shut down more than tens of thousands of IT and OT system within this Saudi state oil company. Essentially, they just shut down the business, right? So the point that I'm making is, if we don't do a good job in this new interconnecting world, making sure both IT and OT are secure, that could happen, right? And nobody wants to see that. All right, SbD, security by design. I'm going to pass it to you, Gus, to talk to us about SbD.
Thank you, Bosco. Thank you for talking about, the context and giving us some insight on what we're going to be talking about. So I'll go ahead and, talk about security by design principle. And, it's something that here at Gannett Fleming, as well as, at other places that I've worked at, is something I've pushed. It's a concept, it's not really a tool. It's not really, something you can buy from a vendor. It's really more of a principle and idea. And, it has a lot of benefits, but, really what it is, thinking about security at the beginning of a project, thinking about security when you're going to make a change to some type of system, what the impacts is. A lot of times we, in the IT world and OT, we just make changes without thinking what would be the security implications if we made this change. And so taking this approach of starting to think about security by design, it really does give you that opportunity to think critically as to how it impacts, the organization's security posture. And it allows you to start, pushing that idea to the organization, to your teams, and it really gives you a process to start with. And if you're a starting security practitioner, this is something you can start looking at. And if you've been doing security for a while, it really is a good principle to start implementing, because it's the foundation of, security. And, it does make a difference. I've been at other organizations where when I came into the organization, security was an afterthought, right? And then they call me after, and I'm like, well, it's you guys should have called me before. And, as I started, building that trust, I was being called into all these different meetings, when a project was kicking off, security was part of that discussion. And, it did give me that opportunity to say, hey, maybe you need to look at this. If we make this change, it's going to impact, the system in this manner, or it's have you looked at, if we make this change, is it going to, how much is it going to cost? Is it even feasible? And so is it even worth, pursuing the project if it's really going to impact our security? And so some of the benefits of SbD, there's a lot, but the ones that, we really want to talk about are the ones on the slide. And, I'll start with reduce vulnerabilities and risk, and I think that's probably one of the easiest ways, to really increase that security posture is if you're bringing in a new solution, let's say you're bringing in a new firewall, right? Ensuring that, the system is patched from the beginning, right? Ensuring that, if there's a CISA alert out there that, that alert of that CISA releases of active, malicious actors are exploiting, make sure that you do patch it because it's easier to do it up front than doing it once it's in production. And that it also, will reduce remediation costs, right? Because if you implement that firewall ahead of time and, implement it without patching, then down the road, you're going to have some downtime to make that change. And, a lot of times that involves testing, and now you have to need resources, you have to have timing, systems are going to be down. And so it reduces cost if you do it ahead of time. And then again, improve development process. You have that process if you're going to make a change. You look at security, you have a process, and it does improve the development process, whether it be implementing a new project, making changes to an existing system. And it does give you that sense of, hey, we know what we're doing, we have something to work off of. And then for critical infrastructure, it just gives you that protection, right? A lot of times it's hard to protect critical infrastructure. It's not as easy as IT where you just push a patch. We're dealing with systems that, impact the safety in the real world, the safety of people. And so it's really difficult, but taking the security by design approach, you have that opportunity that if you're going to be implementing new technologies, you can start working with vendors, you can start working with the integrators and looking at what can we do to ensure that the systems, once they go into testing and commissioning, that they're, protected. And it's also a proactive approach, right? It's showing that, you care about security, that the organization values security. And if there's an incident, you're prepared and you can show that, you were working towards, ensuring that the infrastructure is secure. And so it's just very beneficial to start thinking in this way. And I really recommend, if anything you take back from this presentation, is to start thinking about that if you're a security practitioner. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Bosco to talk about integrated risk management.
Thank you, Gus. So we talk about SbD, super important, right? The other integral part of your project cycle is integrating the risk management, again, to your entire project lifecycle. Identification and mitigation, that's typically part of your risk management methodology, and I'm going to get to it in a couple minutes. But essentially, you just really help to identify and addressing security risks early in the stage of the project cycle, hopefully, rather than later, right? The last thing you want is nobody complete the security risk assessment during the project cycle. When it went live, bad things happen, right? Security incident, ransomware attack. You don't want that. You want this to be integrated into your project cycle, start early. There's international standard out there when they come to cybersecurity risk assessment, just to name a few here. There's NIST SP 800-30, there's ISO 27005, there's RAMCAP that we're going to zoom in and take a look at it in the next two slides. And then there's TRA. If you're up in Canada, there's a very well-known Canadian risk methodology. The bottom line is, you need to use this methodology to help you to identify the security risks as part of the project cycle. Typically, the methodology, they're a little bit different, but at the end of the day, it comes down to this, right? It helps you to identify the critical asset that you're trying to protect within the project scope, right? Identify the criticality level, identify by reviewing the security architecture, the network architecture, the application architecture. You start getting into the threat analysis and the risk analysis of the project, and then you'll identify some security risks, right? And then the risk typically will define it based on the likelihood and the impact of the organization to the organization, and that's how you categorize the security risk level. Again, in the next slide, we're going to zoom in on the RAMCAP. You're going to see a heat map. You probably were able to illustrate what I'm trying to say here, the likelihood and the impact. And then from there, once you have the risk finding, you understand the risk level, the risk finding, you will have mitigation strategy. You will have pragmatic recommendation to the project to help to drive down the security risk to a more acceptable level before the project go live, right? So that essentially is what the risk management component of this will look like. So I'm going to pass it on to Gus. He's going to zoom in again, talk to us a little bit about the RAM cap.
Thank you, Bosco. Yes, RANCAP is a risk management methodology to assess your risk. This is a process we successfully employed during the security and vulnerability risk assessment completed for a confidential utility client. Risk assessments are imperative, but they are only one step in the process of risk management. The risk assessment will provide data that is extremely valuable, and we want to make sure that the data is leveraged in every way possible to manage risk. While working with one of our utility clients, we developed a method to take the RANCAP data and integrate the identified risks into an existing risk matrix using parameters that have already been set by the utility's risk management program. This will allow us to prioritize security risk alongside all the other organizational risks. This includes, taking into account budgets, which are not infinite. So, having this real data really does guide that capital improvement and operational budgeting that allows you to determine, for instance, if money should be, spent to upgrade a pumping station or your access control system, improving it. This process provides you with a cost-benefit ratio for all the findings. So you have real data to tell how implementing the recommendations will lower your risk. Then you evaluate if the investment is worth implementing. And so, yeah, having this process really does give you those benefits of, identifying the likelihood and the impact of happening, right? You don't want to, look at all your assets and try to apply this to every single system you have. You want to focus on the ones that are, critical, that are going to cost the most impact, and you want to make sure that you put that effort there. And so, just wanted to, restate that this process was successfully employed during the security and vulnerability assessment for a utility client, and the client was really happy with the whole process, and they gave them direction and a smooth and implementation of identifying risks. With that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Bosco to talk about implementation strategies and really dive into the case study.
Yeah, so again, this project is a large infrastructure project. Specifically, we're talking about two subway extension for one of the largest cities in North America in terms of the population. In terms of the budget, the budget estimation at this point is $12 billion for both subway extension. So Gannett Fleming job in this particular large infrastructure project is to help with engineering design. So from the rail design to the communication design, the train track, and cybersecurity is part of the deliverable, right? Is to help the client, this government agency, to come up with a cybersecurity design for the two subway extension projects. So when we first when we got involved, when we got engaged, the first thing that we did was we kick it off with the design phase, right? So we meet with the design engineer, try to understand the existing head-end system, the field devices that were in scope for the project. And then from there, we look at the policies, the security standard, the report, the audit, the design manual, any technical documentation that we have for the rail communication network. That takes us to the next stage, the requirement stage, right? From there, we essentially now developing the cybersecurity requirement based on the rail operator standard. So we look at some of the relevant standard, such as 62443, APTA, CLC, and NIST cybersecurity framework. That take us to the next step, right? So we already identify from the security design, security requirement, we already identify a bunch of gaps that, frankly, for us, it's opportunity to provide to the government agency so that they could pass it on to the contractor and become an actionable plan and start putting implementing the security design to mitigate some of these gaps. So the next slide, I'm going to let Gus to talk to us a little bit about the zoning.
Thank you, Bosco. Yes, Bosco, mentioned, when we jumped on this project, we were tasked, to look at the rail network communications and look at the existing systems and look at the systems that were going to be added into the railcom network for the subway extension. And we were working with the engineers and trying to understand, what the connections, security connections, which devices we're working with, that we had that the contractor was going to, implement. And so when we took on this approach, we looked at different standards, specifically, IT, OT standards, and through the whole process, we also looked at the Purdue model. And in looking at the Purdue model, we saw it very applicable to leverage some of that information in the Purdue model to come up with the rail operations network zone classification. And what this did for us, it allowed us to look at all these subsystems and classifying them different zones to identify different security levels. And from this table that you see here on the first column, we identified the criticality level for each specific zone. So, we looked at it from the extremely high zones, which is the safety critical zone, all the way to the low zone, which was the external zone. And then from there, once we classified all the zones, we identified 5 different zones, the external zone, enterprise zone, operation critical zone, fire life safety security zone, and the safety critical security zone. And then looking at the Purdue model, we kind of modified it to align with rail communications, as the Purdue model has additional zones. But to simplify, our approach, we decided to just stick to 5 zones. And then once we identified the zones, we worked with the engineering team, the design team and engineers, and we went through, each different system and started classifying the subsystem into a specific zone. So under the subsystem column, just for an example to illustrate, on the external zone, we identified the FERC collection and master clock systems as applicable to the external zone. When we looked at the enterprise zone, we found that the CCTV and VoIP systems were, applicable to this specific zone. And when we looked at the operational critical zone, ion power meters and SCADA systems were relevant to the zone. And then for the fire life safety, SCADA traction powers, and then for the safety critical, we felt that the RTMS and TDMS systems were very relevant in this specific zone. And then the whole project objective was to come up with cybersecurity requirements for these specific subsystems during the initial design phase. And so this gave us the opportunity to really showcase what it means to implement security by design, where we sat with engineers, we looked at diagrams, we looked at network communication diagrams, and we really sat together as a team and started thinking about, what can we apply as a requirement for security within these different zones and subsystems. And so as we went through the process, we clearly were able to see that, the lower zones had less cybersecurity requirements than from the extremely high zones, such as the safety critical. And as we started going through this process, we noticed that, the lower zone had 14 cybersecurity requirements, and coincidentally, the external and enterprise zones both have 14, cybersecurity requirements we identified. And as we moved down to the more critical zones, more extremely high zones, we noticed that, the requirements almost doubled, and, from 14 to 22, and then, the extremely high safety critical had 23 cybersecurity requirements. And on the left side, this Venn diagram, what I really want to illustrate here is, I've already talked about the different, zones and, their levels of criticality from extremely high to low. But from this picture, and I'm not showing it in the table, is what we have in this specific Venn diagram is the demilitarized zone. So we do understand that the connection between the enterprise and the operation critical zone, there has to be some type of barrier that protects those two connections. And that's where you have that IT convergence, and it's, following best practices, we've helped comfortable with, having the DMZ zone between these two zones. And what I really want you to see is, and illustrate here, is that, these two zones, the enterprise and the operation critical zone, are not communicating directly. The DMZ is the one that's filtering this connection. So anything from the enterprise zone has to go through the DMZ. And then from the DMZ, it has to go back out to the operation critical zone, and vice versa. From the operation critical zone, it has to connect first to the DMZ, get filtered, and then from there, go back out to the enterprise zone. And as we move further down into these different zones and we get into the more extremely critical zones, this arrow that points up, and what I want to illustrate here is that, an extremely high security zone, outbound traffic should only be allowed going outbound. There shouldn't be any inbound traffic. So from the safety critical, only outbound traffic to the fire life safety, and then from the fire life safety, only outbound traffic to the operation critical zone. But there shouldn't be any traffic going back from the operation critical into the extremely high. Now, if there's a situation where there needs to be an exception, there's always exceptions in the security world. What we recommend is that, you really critically think about the impact of making that exception. How does that, impact the security posture? You also want to think about how can we ensure that you have logging on these connections, ensure that, these connections are being monitored. And you also want to make sure that, any of these connections that you are going to make an exception, that you document it, that it's documented with very good notes. Don't just say, hey, we made an exception, opened it from the operation critical zone into the fire life safety zone. No, you want to be explicit and say, this is the host that's connecting to this host, and here's the security of this connection. These are some of the implications you want to look out for, and be very descriptive in that explicit, note that you're going to put in there. And so in the next slide, I'll go ahead and talk about our approach. So our approach when we took on this project was to come up with a process that we can, really build a foundation and replicate across different projects. And so when we looked at this, we came up with a 7-step approach, but in the process, we wanted to come up with a process where we understand that there's the IT and the OT, and there has to be some type of convergence. And so in this process, we developed a control guidelines, but we did it in a way where it was easy enough to adapt to have, IT and OT policies and programs coexist together in one cybersecurity program. Now, obviously, that might not be the case for every single organization. Some organizations might have a separate IT cybersecurity program and a separate OT cybersecurity program. But we wanted to make our approach flexible enough to say, hey, if you're starting from scratch, or if you want to revamp your cybersecurity program, you have the ability to have an IT and OT cybersecurity program that could work in tandem and work together. And so we looked at several different standards. We looked at APTA, CINALAC, and IEC 6243. Some of the IT standards were ISO 27001 and this CSF. And through this whole process, we came up with the control guidelines, and that really was the foundation of our process, and all the different steps link back to our control guidelines, and that really is the blueprint. And from step 1, once we had that control guidelines, we were able to move on to step 2 and assign the controls to each specific zone. So now we had a mapping of zones and controls within each different zone, and we were able to say, hey, if we're in this zone, these are the controls that applies to this specific zone. And then we took it further to assign each subsystem to a zone, and we were able to quickly identify, hey, the subsystem must comply with these specific, controls. And then in step 4, we were able to develop global requirements for all zones, and these were requirements that we thought that would be applicable to all the zones, whether you were in a low external zone or a very extremely high zone such as the safety critical. And once we developed the global requirements, we moved on to look at what are the requirements for each specific zone. So we took it a step further and said, okay, what requirements are just specific for each zone? And from the previous table that we showed, we quickly saw that, the global requirements for all the zones were enough for the external and enterprise zone, but it was really the lower 3 zones, the operational critical, fire, life safety, and safety critical zones, where we needed to have additional cybersecurity requirements to protect these zones. And then in step 6, we took it a step further and developed requirements for each subsystem. And we found the same scenario where the operational critical, fire, life safety, and safety critical zones, these subsystems within these zones had additional cybersecurity requirements from the global and specific zone requirements. And as we mentioned, this process was employed for a rail operator in North America. They were very happy with our approach that they ended up making it, their process for all their future projects, and we got really great feedback. So I'll go ahead and move on to the next slide and talk about some of the challenges and solutions when implementing, security and trying to implement security by design. Because these are the ones that, Bosco and I kind of sat down and throughout our career, we sat down and talked and kind of wanted to bring the ones that we've experienced throughout our past, work lives. And so these are the four, not in any specific order, but if I were to choose one, I think the one that really does stick out to me is a lack of management support, but I'll talk to that in a little bit. But I want to talk about staff resistant to change and new processes. And this one's huge because we know that staff is resistant to change, whether it be updating a new program, right? If you're going from Office 2010 to Office 2013, so even Office 365, it's a whole different way of thinking. And, usually staff are thinking about like, how is this going to impact my day-to-day life? Is it going to make my job harder, right? And so these are things that you got to keep in mind when you're thinking about security by design. The next one I want to talk about is that lack of top management support. This one's huge, and I think this is number one because it's going to be very difficult to talk about a principle if you don't have that top management support. It has to start from the top because if not, you're going to have roadblocks. It's not going to be an initiative. It's not going to tie back to a business objective. But when you have that top management support and you include key stakeholders, whether it be, board of directors or whether it be, the CEO, they're going to tie all of this back to the business, whether it be ROI or availability, and you're going to get that support, and it's going to be a lot easier to make change and to start implementing security by design. And then the next one is siloed departments. This one also is you see it across departments just in regular work life, but when you talk about technology and security, you want to make sure that it's a group effort, right? Where all the departments are working together. You don't want to have a specific security initiative for one department and have a different one for another department. Obviously, there's going to be differences between departments, but you want to have some type of baseline, some type of policy that you can use across departments and not try to reinvent the wheel, right? And then, this idea that security is IT's responsibility, it's not true. And we see it now more and more every day that this is not just IT's responsibility. It's not just the security guy's responsibility. It's really a group effort, right? It starts from the employee all the way to top management. And, some of the solutions to some of these challenges is, if we start implementing security and awareness training, you start including, employees, the staff, and they start taking ownership, you're also able to start having metrics to show, hey, these employees are improving and they're catching phishing campaigns and they're being more educated on, being more aware of, what a phishing email looks like, and that helps in the overall, and it protects the organization. And then that collaboration, right? Having the top management, having IT, having security, having the staff all working together is going to be crucial. It's going to make a difference. The collaboration is key. And, I've seen it in the past where I've been in organizations where there's lack of collaboration and things don't happen and it happens very slowly. But when you have that collaborative effort, it becomes everybody has a sense of ownership. And then, as an organization and more than anything, IT and security personnel, you want to stay up to date with current security trends. You want to make sure that you're aware of what's changing, what are the new trends right now? One of the big things that I see is zero trust, right? You want to be knowledgeable. It's not really a technology or a tool. It's more of a methodology, a way of thinking, trust but verify. And you want to start thinking about these different, emerging trends, AI, how does that impact, how does that impact the organization? We don't want to stop it. We don't want to prevent it in the organization, but we want to educate the staff and say, hey, if you're going to use AI, this is a way to do it. Show them how to do it in a secure way, to not put confidential information, the way they're going to ask questions. So these are things that you want to make sure that you're looking at when you're going to be implementing security by design. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Bosco so he can talk about emerging trends.
Thank you, Gus. So I think we already touched on the subject of AI a little bit. So from the emerging trend and future direction, I'm pretty sure in the last year or two, any conferences that you've been to, one of the things that they really want to talk about is AI, more AI, and more AI, right? At the end of the day, AI is going to stay, right? And I think with the quantum computing, it's going to make it a lot bigger, a lot stronger, a lot more capable. This is really just the start of a new journey in the technology world. Um, Having said that, right, you need to think about what's the impact to my security operation. If I'm the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, I would start thinking, okay, I'll encourage my staff and challenge them to start thinking about what does it mean from the cybersecurity risk standpoint. If you, for example, some of you may already started using the Microsoft Security Copilot, which is the security tool set with AI blend into it, right? So um, it's fantastic, right? It's really fascinating watching how Microsoft Security Copilot is able to help you to defend your network security, your network infrastructure, and what have you. Having said that, when I was talking to some of the Microsoft folks about the Microsoft Security Copilot, they highlighted, look, there's gonna be generative AI hallucination, and they show me some example that, there was a couple security event happen, the AI correlated them, but the conclusion was wrong, right? It was actually a nonsensical conclusion, right? That is the AI hallucination. And I was just listening to the OpenAI CEO Sam Altman's interview. As you know, Sam Altman is the guy behind the ChatGPT under the OpenAI. When you listen to Sam's interview, he made it clear that, look, if we take away the generative AI hallucination, well, then that defeats the whole purpose of the AI, isn't it, right? It's that, you know, um, the right brain of the AI, if you will, be creative, thinking out loud, and what have you. You need to have some of that stay inside the AI, even in new future releases down the road. So with that said, right, what are we going to do with risks like that? When Microsoft Security Copilot tell you that this particular event happened, what kind of verification you need to do as a security operation analyst, right? And things like, throwing clients' information into the ChatGPT window, probably not a good idea, right? So these are the things that we need to think about as the technology going in light speed. We're really catching up to think about what does it mean from the cybersecurity standpoint. So, and then the policy and regulation, as you could imagine, the technology changing and the light speed, the regulation and policy, they're really just catching up, right? As much as they wanted to, but they're still a little bit behind. But what's good though, they understand that, the regulator understand that, they're making changes. If you look at some of these, security in the rail and transport sector, the Rail Security Directive 1580, 1582 will be receiving some amendment. In the water and wastewater sector, the Modernized Maryland Act of 2022, it's going to be introducing new changes. And then if you look beyond US, look at Canada, the Critical Infrastructure Act, they call it the Bill C-26, essentially will name what categorized as critical infrastructure to the country. And with that, they have different level, and with different level, the higher level you are, the more security requirement that you need to comply with. Similar legislation in the EU region, right? The EU Cybersecurity Act has very prescriptive security requirement for the critical infrastructure. And as you know, if you don't follow that or you're not running into non-compliant situation, the penalty is very hefty, right? So these are the things that we really want you to think about. Well, to conclude what we talk about today, right? So SbD or security by design and integrating your security risk management into your project cycle, it's absolutely critical, right? Proactive security measure always save you time, money, and resource in the long run, right? An average cybersecurity breach costs company $9.5 million. And that's just one incident. If you're unlucky, you have two incidents a year. That's $20 million gone. That's a lot of money on the table, right? But if you practice SBD, if you put security risk management into your life cycle, you're going to save money, you're going to save time down the road, dealing with the aftermath of security incident. And that's a really strong business case that you could use to argue with any CFO or CIO or CXO, if you will, when it comes to adding more resource, adding more funding, adding more resource to the cybersecurity team. Embedding security consideration from the outset lead to robust and resilient system. I think the key word here for us is cyber resilient, right? I think if you think about part of my job is talk to a lot of CISO, client CISO, Chief Information Security Officer. I remember 5 years ago when I talked to CISO about ransomware attack, it's about, if that happened, we'll deal with it. But in the last couple of years, that mindset, that mentality shift. It's no longer about if, it's about when. When that ransomware attack happened, locking up your hard drive, locking up the whole network, how quickly can you contain that? How quickly can you bring that OT devices back online, right? That is cyber resilience, right? We need to think about when that happened, when nasty ransomware attack happened, what do we have from the people standpoint, process standpoint, and technology standpoint to defend and also bring ourselves back up to 100% of the production. So the last point is adapting to emerging trend. We talk a little bit about AI. I wish we have a little bit more time on that, but looking at the clock, I think we're already behind. My apologies. But yeah, think about the technology trend. Think about the future direction of some of these policy changes and regulation changes. And call to action. Start today. The fact that you came here today, spend an hour with us, we greatly appreciate it. And take some of these knowledge and material that you learned today, bring it back to your office, bring it back to your project, share that with your colleague, right? Be that advocate of cybersecurity. If you could help to coordinate some of these security awareness training within your organization. Stay informed about the security involving security threat and emerging technology. Guys already talked about it. I subscribe to a lot of different social news feed. I have a lot of these Telegram chat groups, strictly speaking in Russian, talking about cyber attack that they just launched and data that they're selling in the dark web and what have you. It's fascinating, right? If you're in the cybersecurity, you need to be stay on top of it, make sure that you have the latest and greatest, and join the community, right? The SAMEDC Pulse is fantastic community. Leverage that, share your experience, learn from each other. And at the end of the day, we want to say this, right? Cybersecurity is not just the responsibility of the cybersecurity team. It's everyone's responsibility in the organization to help to contribute to the cybersecurity program, to improve the cybersecurity posture, to further mature the cybersecurity program of the organization. So with that, I think that's all we have. I want to say thank you again for everyone's time. I guess I'll pass it back to you, Whitney.
Hey, well, I definitely appreciate that, and thank you very much to both of you. And we still got some time for Q&A. So if anybody has any questions you'd like to submit to both Bosco and Gus, feel free to put it into the chat, and we'll have them address it now. I do have a couple of questions pondering my mind. But from your experience, whether it's on the large transportation project you were mentioning, in your experience, what has definitely been one of the biggest challenges really integrating IT and OT security within a critical infrastructure project?
Maybe I'll jump in here for a second. I think looking at some of the organization's org structure, unfortunately, the IT and OT, they're still in different silos, right? So I only see a few clients able to move the IT and OT and unify them under the CISO's responsibility, really clearly mandated responsibility. Typically, OT will live in their own silo, so it's IT. So to unify them, I think it's step number one. Step number two is, challenge number two, I would say, is the processes and technology, right? The technology is so different in the OT. A lot of folks from the IT, they're just really comfortable with the IT technology stack. But when they get to the OT, you cannot use your traditional IT cybersecurity mentality and run VA scan on the OT devices. You're going to bring them down and you're going to shut down the power. That's the substation that we're talking about. Can you afford that, right? No, the answer is no. So, having the right skill set, using the right technology in that area is very important. I guess the challenge number three, it's, a lot of that is just not documented, right? You need to have documented process to help you to really have a mature security program so that it's repeatable.
Okay.
If I could just jump in and just really quickly just add to what Bosco said is, I think what I've seen and, this is in the OT and IT is, visibility, lack of visibility, lack of knowing your assets, understanding your assets. And I think that's the beginning of everything, understanding your assets, which ones are critical, and then start enabling logging. I've been in so many situations where like login's not enabled and I'm investigating a case and I'm like, well, there's no login. I can't see that visibility. So now how do I know where the entry point happened, right? I don't. So now I got to start enabling that and, start getting that going. So that's why I say visibility and login are key. You have to make sure you have that on,
Okay.
Thank you.
So how about, have you ever encountered, or when was the last time you recently encountered a cyber incident or a near miss that highlighted the importance of securing both IT and OT systems?
You want to jump on that one, Bosco, or you want me to talk
No,
about
go
it?
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was in the education, I was coming in and, there was an incident and, it's what I talked about, I couldn't really tell. I spent so much time just figuring out where the entry happened, what happened. And so it took me about 3 days of investigation. And so what I learned from that experience was, hey, my initiative was we got to enable logging. So I pushed for, getting the SIM in place and we were able to outsource it. And after that project, we were able to also, start implementing some of the logging, enabling logging in the firewall, right? And, we enabled, on the host servers. And so when we had another incident, we were able to see that it was not something critical. It was just, your typical scanning outside the perimeter, trying to get through. So there was nothing internal that we needed to worry about. But had I not had that login and visibility, I wouldn't have been able to make that conclusion.
Bosco, anything on your end of what you experienced?
Yeah, well, it would. One of my client is in the energy utility sector. Unfortunately, when they had OT cybersecurity incident, again, is the challenge number one that I talked about earlier. Um, just lack of visibility. The CISO doesn't have the jurisdiction to investigate. It just slow down that security incident handling procedure to the point that it just spread to a lot of devices. Unfortunately, it took them hours to shut it down to contain it. So then it really bring back to my first point, right? It has to be unified. Um, don't care about the title, frankly, but as long as you have a leader with able to provide that unified leadership when it comes to IT cybersecurity and OT cybersecurity, that's what really needed as the two really coming together, either you like it or not. So, so that's my little story that I could share with you.
Oh, I appreciate that. Uh, so look, this is kind of moving towards the AI side of the world. So how would you keep your firm's information safe when staff might be using a free tool versus a paid AI tool? Is it more than just a policy requirement, or should the firm put safety parameters in place? What would your recommendations be?
Yeah, do your due diligence, right? You're exactly right, Whitney. Some of these open source GPT-based generative AI tools, they actually still need to use your data as part of the learning model. I came across an article yesterday that in the earlier days of ChatGPT got opened up, a lot of Amazon software engineer actually throw proprietary Amazon code into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT actually used that to start learning about the Amazon system and the coding style that they had. And, you know, you eventually will get into some trouble when you really think through this, right? You don't want your crown jewel, which is, as a technology company, a lot of time is your source code in a open AI database. So things like that need to be think through from the risk management standpoint. And I talk about the Microsoft Security Copilot. I wasn't trying to bash them or anything. They actually put a lot of safeguard around the Copilot tool in the security. So the ChatGPT database, the learning model is within your organization. So there's wall that's surrounding that database. So that's good, right? So, but the point is, you still need to do your due diligence. It still have hallucination. What you gonna do with AI hallucination? What kind of verification process you need to put in place to make sure that I could use that information to take action, or if not, what do I do, right? So all that stuff need to be think through.
Okay. All right. Great. We've got one more question and then we close up. But if you have a few minutes, it might be a couple of questions that do come in. But do you know of how many DoD projects that have been designed and what has been their experience in getting the government on board with understanding the cybersecurity begins with a good design of the control system along with the cybersecurity ICS experiment? I know I just threw a lot at you, but if you need me to repeat that, I'm happy to do that. Yeah, how many DoD projects have been designed, and what has been their experience in getting the government on board with the understanding that cybersecurity begins with a good design, along with an ICS expert?
I think that's a really good question, Whitney. DoD is not my client, so I cannot talk. I don't think I could speak intelligent about it. But I do have a lot of government agency client that they follow these risk assessment, which we talked about earlier during the presentation. They follow it religiously because they're government. They're in the public sector. Excuse my French, but when shit happen, the name will be on the front
100%
page.
good.
No
100%
politician
good.
want that. No politician want that, right? So they spend a lot of time making sure that the security governance is there, the risk management governance model is there. Every project religiously need to follow these risk assessment methodology and mitigate the risk before you go live, right? Most of the government agency that I dealt with, they take it very seriously, right? Without that, you just won't able to go live. Again, it's the politic aspect of it, right? No politician want to be in charge of something that, oh my God, it's now on New York Times front page. I don't want that.
Yep.
If I can add to that, is in my previous experience, I haven't really worked directly with the DoD, but I have worked with contractors that do work in projects for the Department of Defense. And what I've seen is there's a push now where like they have the 800-171 and now they have the CMMC. And so with the CMMC, it's been more like you either become compliant or else we're not going to, your contract's not going to be renewed. And so just seeing that push, that, they're taking security seriously and to the point where like you can't connect to our networks if you don't have cyber security, you don't have best practices. And that's what I've seen in my experience.
Great. Well, if you're, we just need to close out, and if you want to stay, we might have a few other questions that come in, but I just want to be able to close out to be respectful of everyone's time. So, but thank you, Gus and Bosco, for being here today. I hope everyone enjoyed today's session. Definitely very informative. It is a big topic, whether it's talking AI, your building systems, critical infrastructure. So really appreciate it. But before we wrap up today's program, I would like to share a couple of upcoming events that we have planned. So please mark your calendar for upcoming local post events as well as some of the national events. that we have. So we are committed to bringing you more content and fun events throughout 2024. Our next First Friday session will be on Friday, April 5th. As always, all registered participants will earn one PDH certificate. Our program is about revamped Davis-Bacon Act rules and how it has reshaped the labor landscape for construction contractors. We're presenters Nicole Alata and Sarah Nash from Pil AR Omaza. And are you interested in sharing your knowledge on any current educational topics for our First Friday series with our members? We are now accepting our presentation applications for summer topics. Visit our website so you can actually submit your topic today. And sponsorships are available to support our popular program. And join our SAME DC Fellows for our Joint Base Andrews Field Chapter with our JBA Industry Forum and Business Briefing and Industry Government Engagement Sessions, followed by a networking happy hour. Learn about upcoming programs and opportunities from Lieutenant Colonel Graham Otten, who's the Commander and Base Civil Engineer at the 316th Civil Engineering Squadron. The event is limited to 30 JBA personnel and 30 industry participants for a total of 60 attendees. Please register by Friday, March 8th, so you can get gate access in time to join the forum. Join us on April 24th, 2024 for our popular DC and Nova Post 16th Annual Small Business Conference. This premier one-day conference is returning to the Capitol turnaround near the DC Navy Yard, and we have a great lineup of government agencies to share the latest opportunities and challenges that can help you fill up your GovCon pipeline. So build your network that is focused on small business teaming and opportunities at this event. It would be Wednesday, April 24th. Sponsorship opportunities are available. We have only a few exhibit booths left if you're interested, so please reserve your booth today. And make sure you mark your calendar for upcoming post deadlines. Our Springtime Seeds Candy fundraiser ends on the 15th. Treat yourself and help raise funds and support our mission to serve our members. Gift cards are available for purchase. And our DC Post scholarship applications are open to college students who are majoring in architecture, engineering, and environmental engineering. Last year, we supported the STEM pipeline with a little more than $40,000 in scholarships. So share our scholarship opportunities with a college student today and help them support their financial journey through college. And applications are due on 1 April. And we've also launched our annual sponsorship opportunities beginning today, March 1st through February 2025. So we have a community of over 7,000. You have an opportunity to leverage our networks to showcase your firm with visibility and international recognition you won't get anywhere else. Support the annual sponsorship, program sponsorship, and events like the First Friday series with our regional and leadership and mentoring program, as well as individual events throughout the year. So check out all the benefits and support the DC Post and your community today. So for more information on these events and deadlines, please visit our website or reach out to myself. I'm happy to talk to you more. And we have 4 notable national events. We have vote for the national directors by going to SAME.org and vote for your next society president, VP, and board of directors by April 15th. And Capital Week is right around the corner. It's at the last week of March. And get your tickets to this one-day event. We can meet the leaders across our government agencies, get outlook on the latest policies and opportunities aligned with congressional budgets and initiatives. So don't miss this event that is coming up at the end of the month. And rising sophomore, junior, senior, interested in hands-on learning in the AEC market, applications for the STEM engineering construction camps are now open, which is located at a military installation around the country. And your camper has the opportunity to receive scholarship and attend to learn more about the industry as a career and make lifetime friends. This year, the DC Post is sponsoring up to 10 campers to attend with free tuition. So don't miss this great opportunity, and applications are due in 2 weeks, so March 15th. And finally, the JETC conference is going to be held in Orlando, May 14th through 16th. We are looking forward to attending, and registration is now open. And Bree and I will be there. along with Ed Chamberlain and Anna Ehrman from the VA. We'll be presenting on a panel called Building Your Company Differentiators to Win Big. So please join us all at JETC in Orlando in May. And don't forget, if you'd like to volunteer and get a free registration, learn more at samejetc.org. So I know I've spoken a lot. I've got here's a list of the additional events that we have on your screen. So we have upcoming events in June and industry forum, as well as events going into July as well. So I would like to say thank you to Bosco Chan and Gus Morales from Gannett Fleming for providing excellent content for our February event. So please look out for document delivery in the subject line, a PDH certificate, and opt-in registration for the opt-in list of participants today. And we will post a recording on our website later this month. And you will also get an email from our presenter with more information. So that's all I have. So thank you again to Fox Rothschild for sponsoring today. And have a great weekend, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you out at the next SAME event. So thank you.